A Vermont state trooper pulled off Route 118 on the afternoon of Saturday, March 20th, 2004, into a stretch of rural Franklin County where a stopped car on the shoulder is barely worth a second look. But this one wasn't on the shoulder. A pale green 1985 Oldsmobile sedan sat backed into the side of an abandoned house, a derelict property locals all had long called the Old Dutch Burn. The rear of the car had punched clean through the siding. A sheet of plywood that had once covered a window lay flat across the trunk. The vehicle faced the road as if it had been reversed into the wall on purpose. The trooper looked inside. There was little real damage to the car. On the front seat were two paychecks, both made out to a 17-year-old named Brianna Maitland. Her wallet was there, her bank card, her contact lenses, the migraine medication she needed, some food. Everything a young woman would carry, everything she would need. Left behind in an unlocked car, rammed into a building roughly a mile from where she had finished her shift the night before. The trooper made an assumption that would haunt this case for the next 2 decades. He decided the car had been ditched by a drunk driver. He called a tow truck. The Oldsmobile was hauled away to a local garage. He drove to the restaurant where the paychecks had come from, found it closed, and moved on to his next call. The car was registered to Brianna's mother. No one called her. No one was looking for Brianna yet, because no one knew she was gone. The ground around the house was frozen solid. There were no footprints, no clear signs of a struggle. Just a car driven into a wall, a teenager's whole life sitting in the front seat, and a silence that has never been broken. Before we walk this trail, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. This case unfolded in a tiny corner of northern Vermont, a stone's throw from the Canadian border, and somebody watching right now might know that stretch of Route 118. Somebody watching might know more than they realize. To understand what was lost on that road, you first have to understand who Brianna Maitland was, because she was never just a missing car and a frozen field. Brianna Alexandra Maitland was born on October 8, 1986 in Burlington, Vermont. She was raised with an older brother on her family's farm in East, a quiet patch of Franklin County, tucked up near the Canadian line. By the accounts of the people who loved her, she was a free and independent spirit from the start. Her father, Bruce Maitland, described her to Dateline as well-rounded and very well-liked, a young woman who, in his words, was always a joy to have around. She was an avid reader her whole life. She was the kind of 17-year-old who was, as her father put it, drifting between interests, the way you do at that age, but talking seriously about going to college. She had a quiet toughness, too. In her youth, Brianna trained extensively in jiu-jitsu, a detail that would later weigh heavily on her parents' minds. She was a slight young woman with brown hair and hazel eyes, a faint scar running from her left eyebrow up onto her forehead, a small ring or stud in her pierced left nostril. To her friends she was simply Bree, or B. She had attended Missisquoi Valley Union High School before transferring to Enosburg Falls High School during her sophomore year. Around her 17th birthday, in the fall of 2003, Brianna decided she wanted to live more independently. Her mother, Kelly, has been clear in interviews that there were no serious problems at home. Brianna simply wanted her own space and wanted to be closer to a circle of friends who lived about 15 miles away and attended a different school. What followed was an unsettled stretch. Her living arrangements became unstable. She moved in and out of several friends' homes. By the end of February 2004, she had dropped out of high school and moved in with a childhood friend, Jillian Stout, in Sheldon, about 20 miles west of Montgomery. But Brianna had not given up on her future. She was working toward it. She had enrolled in a GED program to finish her education. She was working hard. She held down 2 jobs at once, washing dishes and bussing tables at the Black Lantern Inn, upscale restaurant and brew pub in the ski town of Montgomery, and a second job at a diner in nearby St. Albans. A Vermont State Police detective who later worked the case summed her up simply, telling Fox News she was a girl who was trying to make something of herself. It's worth pausing on the texture of that life because it explains so much about what came next. The family home she had moved away from was a solar-powered homestead in rural Franklin County, the kind of place where neighbors are far apart and the nearest streetlight is a long drive away. Brianna had moved out, but by her mother's account, the relationship with her parents had stayed good. This was a teenager stretching toward independence, not running from her family. The Black Lantern Inn was a destination spot in a remote ski town, busy mostly with tourists, and the night she vanished was only her second weekend working there. She didn't yet have a long history at the place. A familiar rhythm with the staff, a settled routine that anyone would have noticed breaking. She was new on the schedule, couch surfing between friends, and finishing a long shift late on a Friday night, a young person living exactly the kind of loosely tethered life in which a sudden absence can go unnoticed for days. That fragility wasn't a flaw in Brianna. It was simply the shape of being 17 and on your own. But it would prove to be one of the cruelest elements of everything that followed. It had not been an easy few weeks before she vanished. Roughly 3 weeks before her disappearance, Brianna was physically attacked at a party by a former friend, a young woman named Kelly Lacrosse. The motive was never entirely clear, though Brianna's father later said he believed it stemmed from jealousy. According to a friend who was there, Brianna, despite all her martial arts training, refused to fight back and was struck repeatedly in the face while she sat in a truck. She suffered a broken nose and a concussion. She filed charges over the assault. It's worth saying plainly. That complaint was dropped about 3 weeks after Brianna vanished, and Lacrosse was later cleared of any involvement in her disappearance. That was Brianna Maitland. Independent, hard-working, bruised by a rough patch, but pointed towards something better, a girl with a GED test to take and a future she was building one shift at a time. Now that you know who Brianna was, not a headline, not a case file, but a real 17-year-old reader who trained in jiu-jitsu and was scraping together a life on 2 paychecks. Does she remind you of someone in your own life, a daughter, a sister, a friend at that age? Tell me in the comments. Saying her name keeps her real. Friday, March 19, 2004, should have been one of the good days. That morning, Brianna sat for the exam to earn her GED. It was the kind of milestone worth celebrating, and her mother celebrated it with her. Brianna's father, Bruce, was out of state at the time, working in New York, so it was Kelly who took her daughter out. The two of them had lunch together, and Kelly has described Brianna that day as being in good spirits. The two of them talking about Brianna's plans for college. In a later interview, Kelly remembered it warmly. They went out for breakfast. Shopping, it was an upbeat day. After lunch, mother and daughter spent the afternoon running errands and shopping. And it's here that the day's one strange note appears, a detail Kelly has shared in interviews. While they were standing in a checkout line, something outside the store caught Brianna's attention. She told her mother she'd be right back and stepped out. When Kelly finished paying and met her daughter in the parking lot, she noticed Brianna seemed different, unnerved, shaken, agitated. Kelly didn't want to pry, so she didn't ask what had happened. Brianna said she needed to get home and get ready for her work shift that evening at the Black Lantern Inn. Kelly dropped Brianna off at Jillian Stout's home in Sheldon sometime between 3:30 and 4 in the afternoon. That was the last time Kelly Maitland ever saw her daughter. Before she left for work, Brianna scrawled a quick note for her roommate, saying she'd be back after her shift that night. Then she got into her mother's pale green 1985 Oldsmobile and drove off toward Montgomery. At the Black Lantern Inn, the evening was ordinary. Brianna worked her shift. Her co-workers would later tell investigators that nothing seemed off about her. She behaved exactly as she normally did. She clocked out at approximately 11:20 p.m. Her co-workers asked her to stay and have dinner with them. She declined. She was tired. She told them, She had to be up early for her second job, waitressing in St. Albans the next morning. She wanted to get home and sleep. By every account, Brianna was alone in her car when she pulled out of the lot that night. The drive from the inn back towards Sheldon was a route she traveled all the time. It runs along Route 118, and somewhere on that ordinary stretch of road she drove most nights, in the dark. On a frozen mid-March night near the Canadian border, Brianna Maitland disappeared. Her car would be found the next afternoon, a mile from the restaurant, driven backwards into the wall of an abandoned house. But Brianna herself was simply gone, and because of the strange, scattered way her life was arranged just then, the alarm wouldn't even be raised for days. That delay is one of the cruelest features of this entire case. Brianna had left the note for Jillian Stout on Friday, but Stout was away for the weekend. When she returned on Monday and saw the note sitting undisturbed exactly where Brianna had left it, she assumed Brianna was simply staying somewhere else. It wasn't until the following day that Stout finally called Brianna's mother. On Tuesday, March 23rd, 4 days after Brianna was last seen, Kelly began frantically calling around. Friends, both of Brianna's employers. Anyone who might have seen her, no one had. That same day, Kelly filed a missing persons report, still with no idea that the car her daughter had been driving had already been found, towed, and impounded. Two halves of the tragedy didn't connect until Thursday, March 25th. Brianna's parents went to the Vermont State Police Barracks in St. Albans to hand over photographs of their daughter. A trooper showed them a picture of an Oldsmobile recovered from the old Dutch burn house. They recognized it instantly. It was Brianna's car. Kelly has said she felt an immediate, instinctive revulsion at the sight of it, and a conviction deep in her gut that her daughter had not left that car in that condition. Someone else had. The first hours and days of any missing persons case are the ones that matter most. In Brianna's case, those hours were gone before anyone even knew there was a case to work. When investigators finally turned their attention to the scene, they began collecting the small, strange details left behind. The car had been backed to the side of the house with enough force to breach the siding. The rear wheels were slightly raised. A piece of plywood that had covered a window lay on the trunk. Inside were the two uncashed paychecks, Brianna's wallet and bank card, her contact lenses, her migraine medication, makeup, and clothing. The car keys, however, were missing. On the ground outside the car, investigators noted loose change, a water bottle, and an unsmoked cigarette. The Maitland family later said that when the car was returned to them, Brianna's glasses, contact lens case, other personal items were all still inside as well. There were complications even in the basic handling of the vehicle. The car was registered not to Brianna, but to her mother, Kelly. Yet, despite that registration, no one contacted Kelly when the Oldsmobile was first towed. According to one account of the case, when the responding trooper initially examined the car, the trunk was not checked because he did not have the keys. It was only later, once investigators connected the vehicle to the missing persons report, that a fuller examination took place. The Oldsmobile was finally processed by the State Crime Laboratory on March 30th, 11 days after Brianna was last seen after sitting impounded at a private garage. Investigators confirmed that physical evidence had been recovered from the car, though they declined to release its nature. It was later entered into the FBI's database. It would be years before the significance of that evidence began to surface. As word of the disappearance spread, several people came forward to say they had passed the abandoned house that very night. One man who drove by between roughly 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. said the car's headlights may have been on, though he saw no one in or around it. A second man, passing between midnight and 12:30 a.m., recalled seeing a turn signal flashing on the car. Around 4 in the morning, a former boyfriend of Brianna's drove past the scene on his way back from a night across the border in Canada. He thought he recognized the vehicle, but again saw no one. The next morning, some passing motorists found the scene odd enough that they stopped and took photographs of it. One of them reported seeing loose change, a water bottle, and a bracelet or necklace on the ground beside the car. Investigators combed the area around the old Dutchburn house on foot and brought in search dogs, including cadaver dogs. They found nothing. The ground was frozen. There were no footprints to follow. In early April, the Klaas Kids Foundation became involved. According to reports at the time, more than 500 volunteers searched within a 5-mile radius of the scene over the course of a weekend. Again, nothing was found. Brianna's vehicle wasn't processed by the State Crime Laboratory until March 30th, after sitting impounded at a garage for several days during which any number of people may have had access to it. In the beginning, the Vermont State Police were openly skeptical that foul play was involved at all. Given Brianna's recent history, a teenager who had dropped out of school, moved out of her parents' home, was couch surfing between friends' houses. Investigators initially weighed the possibility that she had simply run away. It would take roughly 3 months before the official position shifted. Law enforcement concluded that her disappearance was likely the result of foul play. Years later, the head of the Vermont State Police would acknowledge that the department's thinking had evolved over time, reflect on how hard it is to judge what investigators knew in those critical early days. But by then the trail had already gone cold. The reasons this case stalled read like a checklist of everything that can go wrong in the opening act of an investigation. The single most damaging factor was time. Brianna wasn't reported missing for 4 full days. The connection between the missing girl and her abandoned car wasn't made for nearly a week. By the time anyone treated the scene as a possible crime scene, the most fragile evidence, the kind that vanishes within hours, was long gone. Then there was the car itself. Instead of being preserved and processed where it sat, it was treated as a routine abandoned vehicle, towed to a private garage, and left there for days before forensic examination. Whatever the scene at the old Dutchburn house might have told investigators in those first hours was disturbed before anyone was looking for it. The early skepticism cost time as well. While the official theory leaned toward a teenage runaway, the urgency that a suspected abduction demands wasn't there, and the physical environment offered almost nothing to work with. The frozen marsh ground held no footprints. There were no obvious signs of a struggle. There were no eyewitnesses to what actually happened, only a handful of people who had driven past the strange tableau of the car in the wall, none of whom saw Brianna at all. There is one detail, though, that points away from the simple explanations and has fueled this case ever since. The way the car was found, backed into the side of the building, facing the road, struck investigators and Brianna's family alike as wrong. 2007 flyer, the FBI stated that the scene where Brianna's car was discovered may have been staged to appear as an accident. Brianna's parents have publicly speculated that she may have been taken by more than one person, reasoning that a single attacker would have had a hard time subduing a young woman with her jiu-jitsu training. There is the haunting fact that her wallet, her bank card, her medication, and her contacts were all left behind. The belongings of someone who had no intention of going anywhere, left in a car she would never drive again. You've now seen everything the early investigators had to work with, and exactly where they hit the wall. A frozen field, a towed car, 4 lost days, a scene that may have been staged. Before I walk you through the theories, I want your take first. What do you think happened on Route 118 that night? Drop your theory in the comments. This community has cracked details that experts missed before. Over the more than 2 decades since, several theories have taken shape. Each deserves to be weighed on its own evidence. None has ever been proven. The first centers on Brianna's connection to the local drug scene. In the week after she disappeared, the Vermont State Police received an anonymous tip claiming she was being held against her will at a house in nearby Berkshire, about 10 miles from Montgomery, That rented house was occupied by two men, Ramon L. Ryans and Nathaniel Charles Jackson, described in reporting and court records as drug dealers from New York. On April 15, 2004, police raided the house. Inside, they found drug paraphernalia and substantial amounts of cocaine and marijuana. Ryans was arrested on drug charges. There was no sign of Brianna anywhere in the home. When investigators interviewed Brianna's close friends, some told them that she had allegedly experimented with hard drugs in the recent past and was an acquaintance of the two men. Later in 2004, police received a signed affidavit from an anonymous older woman who implicated both men in Brianna's disappearance, claiming she had been killed about a week after she vanished during a dispute over money. It was a detailed account, but law enforcement was never able to corroborate a single element of it, and it bears repeating clearly that no one has ever been charged in connection with Brianna's disappearance, and these remain unproven allegations from an anonymous source. That's the theory many people find most compelling, the drug house angle. But here's the problem with it. Despite a police raid, an anonymous affidavit, and years of scrutiny, investigators could never corroborate any of it. Not one person has ever been charged in Brianna's disappearance. Does that gap change how you weigh it? Tell me in the comments which way you're leaning and why. A second theory is the abduction by a stranger, possibly staged to look like an accident. This is the reading the FBI's own language seems to support, with that 2007 reference to a scene that may have been arranged to appear accidental. Porters point to the car, driven neatly backwards into the wall, the belongings left untouched, the missing keys, Brianna's martial arts background, as reasons to believe she was taken by force, perhaps by more than one person. Real circumstantial weight here. But there is also no physical evidence that has ever publicly tied a specific stranger to the scene. No witness who saw an abduction take place. A development that emerged decades later adds a chilling wrinkle to this theory. In 2025, private investigator Lou Berry, who has worked the case, revealed an account from a couple who said they drove past the old Dutchburn house around midnight that night. According to Berry, they reported seeing a tall, heavy-set man standing in front of the Oldsmobile's headlights, and then, moments later, a silver or gray Honda Civic that sped up and braked abruptly at the scene. It's an account that, if accurate, would suggest Brianna was not alone at that house in the crucial minutes after she left work. But it is recollection surfacing more than 20 years after the fact, and it has not led to a public identification of anyone. A third theory, which captured national attention for a time, is that Brianna walked away and started a new life. On February 17, 2006, security footage at a casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey, captured a woman who strongly resembled Brianna sitting at a poker table. When the footage surfaced the following month, it set off a wave of renewed interest. But the theory has a serious problem built into it. Brianna would have been only 19 at the time, and New Jersey law requires casino patrons to be 21 or older. The woman in the footage was never identified, and there has never been any confirmation that it was Brianna at all. For a family desperate for any sign of life, it was a flicker of hope that ultimately led nowhere. There was also, for a time, a possible connection to a far darker figure. In 2012, investigators examined whether Brianna's disappearance might be linked to Israel Keyes, a serial killer who had owned property in Constable, New York, not far across the border, and was known to have been active in the region. But in late December of 2012, shortly after Keyes died by suicide in custody in Alaska, the FBI ruled out any connection between him and Brianna's case. One comparison has shadowed Brianna's case almost from the beginning, and it's worth addressing directly because so many people raise it. About a month before Brianna vanished, a college student named Maura Murray disappeared after a car crash in northwestern New Hampshire, roughly 90 miles away. Two young women, two abandoned cars, two vanishings within weeks of each other in the same corner of New England. To many observers, it felt like too much coincidence to ignore. But law enforcement examined the question and deemed the two cases unrelated. They remain officially two separate mysteries that happened to unfold close together in time and place, a reminder of how easily the human mind reaches to connect tragedies and how often those connections don't hold up. Finally, there are the tips that never went anywhere. The anonymous phone calls the family received over the years, claiming variously that Brianna had been left tied to a tree in the woods or disposed of at the bottom of a lake. None of these claims was ever corroborated. They are, like so much in this case, noise without resolution, the cruel static that fills the silence where an answer should be. This trail has now been cold for more than 20 years. Brianna would be in her late 30s today. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. Cold cases get solved every single year, sometimes after decades, often because of one person who finally decides to speak. If you've ever followed a case that cracked open long after everyone gave up hope, tell me about it in the comments. Those stories are exactly what families like the Maitlands hold on to. Brianna Maitland's case is not closed. The people working it are emphatic about that distinction. As the director of the Vermont State Police put it, on the 20th anniversary, this is not a cold case, it's an unsolved one, and there has been movement. On the 12th anniversary, in March 2016, investigators revealed they had recovered DNA evidence from Brianna's car, though they did not make the results public. That July, the old Dutchburn house, the building Brianna's car had been driven into, a landmark in this case for 12 years, was destroyed in a fire. By 2020, the Vermont State Police had partnered with Othram, a Texas-based laboratory specializing in advanced forensic genetic genealogy, to try to trace the origin of that DNA. In March 2022, they announced a breakthrough of sorts. They had found a match to a DNA sample taken from an item of interest near the car. The identity was not released. Officials said only that it belonged to one of 11 people they had previously tested in connection with the case, that the person had been very cooperative and had spoken with them, and crucially, that there was not enough evidence to consider that person a suspect. Then, in March 2024, on the 20th anniversary of the day Brianna drove away from the Black Lantern Inn, FBI and Vermont State Police announced a reward of up to $40,000 for information leading to her recovery. The FBI's special agent in charge of the Albany field office framed it directly. Someone out there may have the information that solves this case. It's been too long, and it's time to come forward. No tip is too small. As of the most recent reporting, there have been no confirmed sightings of Brianna, and the investigation continues. Through all of it, her family has refused to let go. Brianna's father, Bruce, has moved out of state, but he has channeled his grief into action, founding a nonprofit called Private Investigations for the Missing to help families who can't afford investigators search for their own missing loved ones. Two former Vermont State Police colonels serve on the board of that organization. He has said plainly that he fears the worst, that he doesn't believe his daughter is still out there walking around. But he has also said something else, something that has held true for more than 20 years. For as long as he's alive, he'll do everything he can to find her. Brianna's case has never faded from public view, and that may be one of its few advantages. It has been profiled on Dateline NBC and featured on the Investigation Discovery series Disappeared in 2011. It has been the subject of true crime podcasts, including The Vanished, and it has driven at least two people to spend years of their lives chasing answers. A private investigator who worked closely with the Maitland family published a book about the case in 2023, the product of nearly 2 decades of pursuit. Every retelling does the same quiet work. It keeps Brianna's face in front of new eyes. It keeps alive the possibility that the one person who knows what happened might finally be moved to speak. If you know anything at all, about what happened to Brianna Maitland on the night of March 19, 2004, there are people waiting to hear it. You can call the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324. You can reach the Vermont State Police tip line at 1-844-484-FITIPS. That's 1-844-848-8477. And if you would rather not speak to law enforcement, you can contact the Private Investigations for the Missing tip line at 1-866-331-6660. A reward of up to $40,000 is on the table for information that brings Brianna home. Brianna Alexandra Maitland was 17 years old. She was a reader, a fighter, who chose not to fight, a daughter who just earned her GED and was talking about college. She left work that night, wanting nothing more complicated than to get home and sleep before an early shift. She deserved to make it home. Her family deserves to know where she is. Somewhere in America, this trail is still cold, but someone out there remembers something. If that someone is you, make the call.